And this is my 25th year teaching. I do like it in my song. I teach at Greenboro High School, and I teach special education, science, and social studies. But I spent 18 years of my career in middle grade. My master's degree is middle grade science and social studies, and I realize that's an odd combination, but those are two things that I like the most. And you know, if we keep passionate about what we do, then we enjoy it, and our kids enjoy it. And that's what it's all about. My partner in crime, Sharon Rogers, is not here. She and I actually co-teach chemistry together at Greenboro High School. And we talk about STEM, which you know is a nationwide initiative. Some classes lend themselves to STEM very easily. In a science class, have you ever taught science before? Anybody? Almost everything you do is going to revolve around STEM in some way. And if you've taught math, anybody? I often have to co-teach in math, and I do not enjoy that. Even though I'm math-minded, it's just something about, just because you can do math doesn't mean you teach math. And those are two different concepts. But certain subjects lend themselves naturally to the concept of STEM, but other subjects not so much. And a lot of times we don't think about STEM in social studies. But I want to show you a few things today that really make STEM a natural part of social studies. And a lot of it you're doing and you don't even realize it. Our focus today is on teaching with primary sources. How many of you are familiar with that concept? Awesome. And so I'm going to use one source from the Library of Congress. And I'm going to use it in two different ways. Come on in, ladies. So what's up? We're going to get started. And I don't know our clicker is. If you're not familiar with it, STEM is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education. It is a nationwide initiative, and its ultimate goal is to prepare students for careers in the future. And think about it, most of the careers don't even exist yet. Like I said, this is my 25th year teaching. When I went through my undergraduate degree, there was no internet. When I got my master's degree, there was no internet. I mean, we're talking about research in the old Reader's Guide catalog stuff. Okay? So, all the careers today that deal with technology and the internet did not even exist 25 years ago. We don't even know what we're preparing our students for. And that makes it challenging as educators. So one thing we can do, we have to do, is we have to prepare them to think. Okay? And I know that you do that every day in your classroom, but that is a big part of the whole STEM initiative. It's not just about the science. It's not just about the math. It's not just about the engineering and technology. It's about getting kids to think and think critically. How many of you know that in your classroom, if kids would just read, they would do so much better? Okay, you've been there, done that, right? So that's part of the push of STEM. Is not just, we know they can read, but to read critically. And read for the message that's underlying. And that's part of what we're going to do today with primary sources. Okay, so who benefits from STEM? Everyone. For your advanced students, they're challenged through more rigorous instruction, through higher order thinking. For your struggling students, they're challenged to think and work through problems they wouldn't normally come across. How many of you have special education students in your classroom? Everybody should have their hand raised. You do. How many of you have 504 students? Gifted students? ESOL students? Okay, you know what I'm talking about? Today's homogeneous grouping, they left a long time ago. When you came through school, you were probably in a class where most everybody in that class was just like you, academically, on the same plane. Those days are gone. And it's up to us as educators to differentiate our instruction and our activities to meet the needs of all of our students. And that's a challenge. I mean, that is a daily challenge. And do what your administrator wants. And follow the new TEKS. And if you're 8th grader teachers, some of you are teaching for high school credit. So then you're looking at your feeder school's crappy score. That's not really the name of it. It's the CCRP. We call it crappy in my school. So there's a lot of things that feeds it. Do you know that your high school does not get credit if their students don't graduate in 4 years anymore? A lot of middle school teachers don't realize that. And so your feeder school, your system, their high schools are graded by the number of students now that enter as freshmen and graduate in 4 years. And that summer school graduation does not count for AYP. So this is something that we've got to start in middle school and build up. How many of you have writing initiatives in your school? That's a Columbia County initiative right now. Everybody's writing. Our math teachers are hating it. They're writing. We're all writing. But STEM can also easily be adapted to meet the needs of all learners. Okay? You've got your students of varying levels of disability. You've got your students who are gifted. And STEM can meet them all where they're at. And all students benefit from cooperative learning situations and communication activities. How many of you know? I'm not going to say that child because I'm talking about adults now. You might work with them. You might be married to one. I don't know. But how many of you know the adult who is super duper smart? They're incredibly scientifically minded. They're math geniuses, but they can't communicate with normal people. How many of you know those people? Okay. Some of them are students in your classroom, and they don't understand why everybody in class doesn't get it the first time. And some of those are adults who never learned how to communicate. So that's one part of STEM that people don't even realize is part of STEM, and that's being able to communicate what we're doing, or just communicate with people in general. So teaching with primary sources. These are things, when I look at social studies standards, that we're already doing. How many of you work on data interpretation with your students? You know that when they take that CRCT in 8th grade, and if you're teaching, if your school is teaching classes for 9th grade credit, would they be taking the EOCT? That there are always lots of charts and graphs on those assessments, aren't there? Okay, there's traditional bar graphs, histograms, there are pie charts, there are documents. How many of you do DB questions in your classrooms? We do a lot of those too, because that's where they take an excerpt from a primary document. And again, that's that imprinting and reading skill. And we associate that with social studies knowledge or even with reading skill, but that is actually a STEM strategy. Don't even realize you're using it. So some of you do the document analysis already. Science principles that you're already teaching in social studies, if you're teaching about oceans, mountains, biomes, genetics of any type, when I talk about genetics, I'm talking about when you talk about social groups around the world, and you talk about physical characteristics of people who maybe live in Himalayas, then you're talking about genetics and you don't even realize it. When I began to look up talking about STEM and incorporating it in middle grade social studies, there is a wealth of knowledge out there. Again, things that you're already doing, just activities to go with it. And then how many of you do any type of graphing? Okay? If you don't, this is probably the easiest way that you can incorporate STEM into what you're already doing. How many of you use topographic maps? Okay, that's something that a lot of people stay away from, so I'm glad you guys are using that. Topographic maps are where you take a flat map and you see the different elevations, and I know you realize that. And a lot of social studies teachers present that. This is what it looks like. This is how you know this is a mountain. But they don't actually deal with it. Because a lot of social studies teachers, historically, don't want to deal with the numbers. And when we look at topographic maps, and all asking students to do is simple elevations, taking the distance between the sea level elevation and the highest level elevation on the map. And what we're doing in that is you're having them, first of all, find the numbers, and that's a big key for some of our kids, and then to interpret them. And that's nothing that you have to plan anything fancy or special about. You're already doing it. Just add the numbers. No special formulas, none of that. All right. How many of you in your schools are under TEKS now? Okay. One of your components of TEKS is differentiation. And your administrators expect to be able to see it and pick it. Now, we're hoping our administrators know what we're looking for, right? But they're expected to see it and pick it out when they come in the room, whether it's for one of those little short observations or if it's for your long observation. And I don't know how it is in your school. If my administrator doesn't see it when he walks in the door, he expects it to see it in the lesson plan, thinking that maybe I was going to get to it towards the end or whenever. One thing we can do, this is huge, it's one we don't use enough, okay? And that is to preview our activities. If we're going to have a special activity, sometimes a special activity comes to you in the morning on the way to work, doesn't it? I could do this today. You didn't really plan it ahead, and sometimes those are actually the best activities because it was just inspired. But when we know ahead of time when we're planning stuff, we need to help our students plan. To our general classroom, let's talk about what we're going to be doing tomorrow. If you need them to bring anything special to make it more fun for them, you can ask them, but you can't rely on that. You know that. You can't rely on them remembering. And if you have the benefit of a co-teacher, let your co-teacher take a small group and preview them separately, especially if it's a day you're going to throw a whammy out there and you're going to introduce numbers in your social studies class. Okay? Because for our kids who struggle in math, social studies is a safe place. Okay? And for some of our students, and I don't mean just special needs students, but some of our students look at a number and they tune everything else out. And social studies is their safe place. So if we're going to be introducing some type of mathematics concept in social studies, we need to preview that with them. And if you have any students on the spectrum in this group, they really need that. That preview is important. When the schedule's going to be changed, it's really important they know that ahead of time. I think we overuse this word, purposeful grouping, and we say cooperative groups, and that's not necessarily the same thing. You know your students. And if you have those special needs students, you know who they work well with. That's one type of purposeful grouping. Sometimes we're grouping by abilities, not necessarily all the smart kids in one group, but we're staggering those levels out, okay? And that way we know there's a strength in every group. And when I say strength, I don't necessarily mean smart or more academically inclined. Depending on what our activity is, it may be that special needs student. If it's an engineering-based activity, like when I give you these Legos, some of you are going to struggle. I ain't lying about it. But you know, that child maybe excels there. Okay. Again, clear, concise directions, easy to interpret data records. Sometimes we give students, because we're trying to save paper, because our school's trying to get us to save money, we jumble as much as we can on a piece of paper. Well, for our students that have perceptual disorders, whether it's a visual impairment, whether it is that they're on the spectrum, whether it's a learning disability, they need that data separated out and color-coded if possible. And then pictures. Pictures. You know your students. And if you have those non-readers, and I know we like to think they don't exist in middle school, but we know they do, because they exist in high school. If we can give directions with pictures, that always helps. And then if you have ASD students in your classroom, there needs to be some kind of nonverbal safe signal. One that I've used before is sticky notes. And that sounds really weird, and it sounds juvenile, but it works. If you have an ASD student and they're feeling that frustration, they can take a sticky note or colored paper, and when they crumple it, that's an automatic sensory thing that they need. But it's also a signal to me as a teacher, I need to get over there. Okay, so if we're doing anything out of the ordinary, and we have these special needs in our classroom, we need to be sure we're addressing those, whether it's STEM or anything else. Okay, some of the example activities that I want to look at today. First of all, let me show you the primary source, and I'll do that. Just off the one we want to do the primary source. All right, this is a PDF from the Library of Congress, and it's from a newspaper in 1918. And this document viewers, it's either not working or I'm not working. Let me just say that. I couldn't make it work. But this is the original source from the Library of Congress. It's a neat, when you pull it up on the website, it looks very neat and authentic. And, you know, I know as social studies teachers, we always want to have our students connect. And that's probably one of the most difficult things is, why do we have to learn this? This is old people. This is old stuff. Why would you learn it? So when we use primary sources, it makes it more relevant. We show them this, and we say, oh, this is from a newspaper back in the 1900s. When we show them this, it really was a newspaper. And when you pull it up, and I don't know why it didn't pull up on that, but when it pulls up this way, it looks like this. And again, it helps bring history alive, and that's what we want to do. This is actually a unique document. It is an article from a newspaper. And I'm not going to read it to you because I know you can read, but as it goes through, it talks about underwater exploration, which is one of the activities we're going to do today. Talks about exploring sound underwater. It talks about the invention and the laying of the transatlantic cable, which allowed communication. It also talks about, what was the one thing I talked about? I forgot. But there are several flight. How could I forget that one? The invention of flight. And once, even though flight had been invented prior to this, at this point in history, they were working on how to make it safe. So the whole article is not just about science and history blended, but it's about how do we think futuristically. It's taking these things that were new of the day and how do we make them better. And again, getting kids to think forward and engaging them. We talk about, I bet, how many of you teach 8th grade? Anybody? I bet you can target those kids right now that you know are in danger and might graduate. You know it. If we can engage our kids, we have a better chance of keeping them. And we know that as students graduate, their chances of success in life are much greater. And we don't always measure success by how much money they make. But we're all adults in here. We know they got to make some, right? We definitely want to give them all the opportunities that we can.
I have a question.
Yes,
what
ma'am.
types of texts would you suggest selecting to try to engage them better?
What kind of text?
Yes.
Well, this is from the Library of Congress, and there are a wealth of sources out there. You're going to have to look at your standards, and I don't know which social studies you teach. And if you're teaching Georgia studies, there's tons out there. Many of you may have a chance this afternoon to go visit Miss Petty's Bringing History Alive. She's part of the cohort group. I'm working my EDS here, and she has developed a mini course in field trips. But how many of you have money for field trips? None of us, right? But bringing them in the classroom through the internet, it's kind of cool. But as far as actual sources, honestly, you can go just about anywhere. The National Association of Science Educators has lots of sources. Like the Library of Congress has got every subject you can think of. Just tons. This particular one, though, I picked because it covers a lot of different areas that we deal with in social studies. We love to talk, a lot of people like to only talk about Native Americans or talk about inventors and those kinds of things. This talks about several different things. How many of you have ever taught language arts before? You teach it now, great. All right, how many of you heard of the Socratic Circle? You don't do that? Okay, that's huge in high school language arts, Socratic Circle. Where you read something and you discuss it in that circle format. One thing I've done with primary sources is to do what's called a silent Socratic Circle. And it's nothing I invented. It's not an idea I stole from somebody else, a language arts teacher. And I would be the worst possible language arts teacher, by the way. But in this article, what I would do with this particular article, and what I have in the other articles, you're all familiar with the jigsaw concept, right? Okay. Well, this is like a jig within the saw. Okay? And you take this article and you break it down. Like this, I would break it down in 3 parts. The underwater exploration, the laying of the transatlantic cable, and the flight. And I would have a group, one group doing, or several groups doing all 3 of these. But they would jigsaw within their group, silently. And you can do this in different ways. I've had them do it on note cards and each use a different color of ink. And they write down what just one thing they got out of that section of that article. And they passed around within their group. And as they're passing it around, they're reading not only their idea, but their friend's idea. And passing them around and around and around. And then they can share. So they have gone over it with their own group. And they get a chance to talk about it. As a group, what are we going to let everybody know? And by the end of the class period, we thoroughly discussed the whole article. So it's kind of it's a different concept. It's a nice, quieter concept. I don't know how, and if we have some students don't function well in what I call organized chaos. Y'all heard that before? So that silent Socratic circle gives everybody an opportunity to have input a little more safely because they're not having to speak out. And then that person who's comfortable speaking out gets the opportunity to speak out when it's time to share. Just another idea. There are two activities I wanted to share with you today. I brought a third one, but we're really not going to have a chance to do it. How many of you, if you ever taught math, and I said we raised your hand, you've done the candy map, where you take a packet of M&Ms or Skittles and you graph the numbers? Mm-hmm. Well, this activity is the STEM version of that, and I brought some that you could take. And one thing that's wonderful about STEM is you can do it at any level. You can do just that basic probability and count the colors and go from there. But then you can also, run the stats. And you math could probably love run the stats, the rest of us don't. But if you've got 8th graders, that's one of their standards in math, is statistics. Basic statistics, meaning, if you were having the advanced math groups, then you've got some variance going on and other things that I don't even like to think of. Also, in addition just to doing the bar graph of the colors, we can reorder those and we can develop histograms. And this little packet has a lot of different levels that you can take that same activity and differentiate within the same class period to meet the levels of all of the learners, which is what we all aim to do. So that's one activity that I just wanted to share with you. The other one I wanted to do with you, y'all want to do Legos first or you want to do diving first?
Legos.
Okay, I only brought 4 sets of Legos. Now what you have to do, if you're going to do this in your classroom, you can't have them in the box. Okay, I'm going to trust that you're not going to cheat. If you do this activity in your classroom, you've got to take the Legos out and put them in a Ziploc bag. And you've got to only have the blocks and the directions. Okay? So I need you to break into 4 groups. How about you guys at 4? If I get you 4 to be a group right here, gentlemen in the back. And, well, actually, just, we could do 3 groups even. Well, here, let's do this. You, why don't you 3 be a group? And why don't you 3 be a group? How about that?
Okay.
If you'll join these 2.
All right.
And then you 3. Yeah, you guys turn around and correct right here. Yeah, you 4. Okay. Really and truly. Okay. Only 2 people at a time are going to actually be doing this. Okay? This is communication meets engineering. So what I need is 2 people to put their chairs back to back, and the 3rd person or the 4th person control the Legos right now. Okay? So the 2 people that are going to be actively involved, they're going to be back to back. Okay? The 3rd or 4th person is going to hold on to the box of Legos for right now. Okay? Okay. If you've got the box of Legos, open it out. Oh my goodness. Open it up and separate out the directions and the blocks. Okay? You're going to give the blocks to the builder, so you guys decide who the builder is. And the directions. So that's another STEM activity, how to open Legos, right? So go ahead and open the blocks up and give the blocks to whoever's going to build. And the directions to the other person. Again, they should not see each other. Go ahead and open up all the Legos.
This is gonna be interesting.
Some of you already see where this is going, so don't cheat. Don't cheat. Now look at the pictures. Okay, here's the deal. The two people back to back can in no way look at each other. Okay? The only thing they can do is talk. They cannot say what they're building. Okay? They cannot give hints as to what they're building. They're going to look at the directions step by step. Starts with one. Okay? And they're going to tell the person, their builder, how to build whatever's on that box. Okay? And that those of you who are not building or communicating, I want you to start thinking about, pick out what you see happening between those two. Okay? Because that's what we're targeting. Go.
All right, there is a long rectangular section. Do you have a piece like that? I need you to snap that onto a smaller black rectangular section up in the front.
Square shape. The round circles, I'm gonna call pips.
Okay, pips, gotcha.
Okay, so it's
Like
2 by 2.
sticking off of it?
Yes, it's 2 things sticking off each end.
Are they round?
Yes. All right, and then you're looking for a gray pip that's 2 by 3.
Got it.
All right, you're gonna put that on there with the 4 on the left over that black one. Yes, so on the right, as you hold it in your hand, on the right side, you'll have 2 hanging over.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
3 gray,
The 2 by 3 gray, 2 of them are hanging off the bottom, or
off the side, the right side.
okay, what's the side? Is the side where the thing is sticking out?
No. Yeah, hold on. Hold on.
Like the 2, I'm holding it in my hand with the black, with the 2 little things.
All right, hold it so that one is pointing at you. All right, and now put it over so that your the 4 on the left or go onto that first one. I'm going to take you back to
Braille.
attach the
We're doing this next week. Doing this next week. It's amazing. Got it.
That dark gray or light gray?
The picture of the dark gray.
Okay.
Put the gray piece on top of the black.
There's another one. There's 2 up front, so that one on each side of the black square.
Because they're thinking it's simple, but they're trying to communicate it. It's creating an entirely different language. That's what we're going to call it here.
Your gray piece goes on the black piece.
Black thing is in the middle of the 2.
So that's done.
Hold on just a second. It's a great idea.
Okay, in the essence of time, I could give you an hour and we still won't build this stuff, okay?
So the 2 gray things, where am I putting them?
So what I want to hear from now, I want to hear from the builder. I have 4 builders in this room. Can some of the builders share with me frustration you felt?
Yeah, because she said big black square.
So she wasn't using the words that you needed.
Right.
Okay. All right. How about another builder?
Well, I had to learn what a pip was, and wrote in Lego World. I guess I never named the pips, but now these will forever be pips
Okay,
for me.
so you don't speak the same
No, we
language.
did not speak Lego.
It's our Lego. I don't know about anybody else's, but that's our Lego.
Lego.
All right, take this engineering activity, go back to social studies. These people didn't speak the same language. Is that a problem today?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any builders over here with frustration?
I just didn't know how to position the round black thing.
There you go. We got the language barrier. Sir?
I don't think the person reading didn't know how many pieces we had.
Okay. So we didn't go into it with the right mindset. All right, communicators. Those of you giving directions, what frustration did you feel? Ma'am?
I felt like we should have dumped them out so that he could find them easily.
Oh, so it's
I
his
kept
fault.
repeating. I kept
Conflict.
repeating. He said, well, there are a lot of pieces, but if you lay them out, then you can see the gray pieces, because I told him it was gray. 6 circles all the time. So the gray piece was 6 circles, you're not gonna look at anything else, bright gray. So I felt like.
So you felt like you were being clear and concise, he just didn't have it set up right.
I don't think he had where he could identify the pieces.
I hear you.
I could be wrong, but that's what I felt.
Okay,
Wow.
over here.
Yeah, I was just trying to describe because this got lines in it. And it was hard to describe. Really wasn't sure if it's dark gray or black or.
Okay. Have you ever tried to build something that came in a kit that said like some assembly required and you went, oh my gosh. Okay. All right. How about over here? Communicator.
Well, I've built a lot of Legos, and so, like, the first one, I say it's a 2x2 or a 2x3 because that's
Because you know what you're talking about.
right. And the first little piece had, it's got these 2 little things sticking out.
Right.
Well, I know that you would never put a piece over it so that you couldn't see that.
Uh-huh.
Because
I did not
you're
do
immediately, you're obviously going to need these 2 things, and you're going to need access to them. So she asked me, which way does it go? And that told me she'd never done it because I didn't think like that, because automatically, you got to have access to this.
Can
So
I tell you-
there's no
I don't
other
mean
way
cut
to
you off,
go.
But we are running short. But I want to tell you what I see here, what I hear her saying to me. She doesn't have the same experience I do.
Right.
Do we see that in our classrooms? All the time, guys. Our kids come to us with different experiences. They come to us with different levels of knowledge, and we come to them here as adults, and they're here. And I know middle schools think they're grown, they're not. High schoolers aren't either, I promise. How about here, communicator?
I think our biggest problem was I probably should have gone through all the notes.
Oh.
Or maybe looked at the back to see
Okay.
okay, it's a 1X or it's a 2X or it,
So if you had read the directions.
Yeah, if I
Okay.
read all of the directions, or there's a piece on the back that shows the name of them.
Okay. And maybe if she used about Lego, she would have done it. Okay, now those of you, real quickly, those of you who were watching, you weren't part of this building and communication process. Guys, do you see let me just ask you this. Those of you who teach American government, Georgia studies, and you're talking about the building of a nation, the building of a state. Do you see a little politics here? Okay, people, politicians, officials with a plan in their head that they got to get out to everybody else. They got to get people on board with. Got to get people to buy into. Anything we study about Social Security, nobody wanted to buy into that, and now people can't think about doing without it. Okay, so do you see where we're going here? Communication is key. Period. In any subject. And it's a component that we often leave out of STEM, or not we, period, but as a general rule, people think, oh, I got to be doing math if I'm doing STEM. Yeah, there's got to be some of that. I got to be doing science if I'm going to be doing STEM. Yeah, but you've also got to be communicating. So for those of you who are watching and not actively involved, let me hear from you. Just a few quick things. Yes, ma'am.
It was just interesting because on her very first step, which I think can be the most important one, the first piece that she mentioned, she described the shape, but she didn't say the color.
Oh, okay.
On one of them, she said the color, because she was talking about 2 different pieces. One of them, she used the color and the shape, and the second piece, she used just the shape. And so I noticed that right away, that's what threw her off.
So lack of communication from the get-go.
Right.
Bad foundation. Gotcha. How many of you who were just watching, looking, wanted so badly to help? That's hard, isn't it? Okay. How about over here, those that weren't actively involved? Any thoughts that you saw?
Well, she actually did a pretty good job of describing the piece.
Uh-huh.
Because when she was describing, I was looking too.
Yeah.
And first I thought it was this, but then she described, her description. And I could,
Right.
because I was looking at all
Right.
the pieces, I could see what she was talking about.
And but also you can see the big picture too, because you knew what the final product was going to be. And guys, that's key. Okay? When we're trying to connect engineering and we're trying to connect social studies involved, you think about engineering. An engineer are those students that you have that see it in their head and can get it on paper. And until they get that final product on paper, whether they're designing something or whatever, nobody else knows what they're talking about. If they just describe to you what's in their head, we don't make that connection. Okay? Those of you who saw the picture up front, you knew where the communicators were going. Okay? So you have the benefit of that. And that's why I said if you do this activity with students, they can't see that box. Okay? They just got to have the block and the directions. And I think we underestimate communication in all disciplines. Okay? This is actually also a writing activity. It was I first saw this activity, a language arts teacher presented it, and it was an activity in communication. And they were writing down the steps. Okay? Kind of a neat, engaging way to do that as well. This is the STEM activity, the actual lesson plan. It goes with the Lego activity. It can be done with, I chose Legos because they were easy, they're already together. But it can be done with anything. You can do it with Lincoln Logs, you can do it with, it doesn't even have to be a prefab thing like this. You can just take a bucket of Legos and you can have one person design their own activity and then try to get somebody else to do it.
I did something very similar to this some years ago, but it was a communication activity, but it was a square, but the square was made up of different shapes and different colors, and so it was a little bit less overwhelming than it wouldn't for kids, middle school kids. They did it. It was difficult,
Right.
but you had the same idea. One person had to give the directions, the other person had to build it. It was
That is neat.
yeah.
The actual activity that Dr. Walker wanted to do with y'all, we didn't get to, because I think we're running out of time.
Yes, ma'am.
This is, this deals with Boyle's Law, and this is one of your 8th grade physical science standards. And the idea is equilibrium. How many of you have ever dove in, is that even a word? You dive in the deep end of a pool, or you've been in a plane and your ears go popping. Okay? And you know by nature that if you start adjusting your head, hold your nose and blow it, start chewing gum, something, it causes that popping sensation in your head, which equalizes the pressure. Okay? But this is a YouTube video that actually demonstrates that, and it keeps it at a very simple level. And this is the formula that goes in it. What happens is, as pressure increases, volume will decrease. Because, when you're going to solve for one, you'd be reworking this to make it a division problem, which makes it an inverse relationship. So as one goes up, one goes down. You think about you squeeze a balloon. As you decrease the volume, by squeezing the balloon and making it smaller, you're increasing its pressure. Pretty soon, you're going to lose pressure in your tires because it's going to get colder. Okay? So we see Boyle's Law at work a lot. And in a social studies class, I wouldn't even put this on the board. Okay? Because this is not what we're dealing with. Okay? But if we're talking about any type of underwater exploration, this is a fun activity. And many of you have probably seen it before. It's called a Cartesian diver. How many of you are familiar with that? Oh, this is scary. But you take most of the time it's done with a 2-liter bottle and the droppers, and the idea is they can't put the water inside the dropper. Then it just sinks, and you have nothing. But if it works just as well with these, and this was the primary activity today, but you guys have so much fun with Legos. That when they put this in here, and if they adjust the pressure right on the cap, then they're going to squeeze the bottle, and the diver, which is this, is going to go up and down. Because we're going to have an equilibrium of pressure, eventually. And when we're going to summarize these types of activities with our students, we need to give them the words to say. Okay? Especially because social studies is not the class where we're teaching that science standard. Okay, but we're talking about underwater exploration, and we do sometimes. This would just be a fun way for them to see what happens when you dive. Most of our students have been in the water before. And they know as you go down, you feel this pressure inside of your head, popping in your ears. This is a good connection activity, and it can be done with absolutely no math. or it can be done, if you have one of those top groups, you've got your gifted social studies class, they would love to connect the math. Okay, and so that's another activity I wanted to provide for you today, but like I said, you guys had so much fun with the Legos. I like the Legos too. Does anybody have questions? I think we're done with that. I'll put my email on the board if you would like to contact me. I'll be glad to share with you anything I can. And I'm glad you're all here today.
Is it possible to get digital copies of like the Lego project and the diver?
Oh, sure. We can. I mean, I can.
If I email you?
Sure. We're glad to. But and then the hard copies are here as well. Okay. The communication games are is the Lego. I'll clean up, guys, because I know.